Hi, I'm Leo Bamford from My Bubba, and I'm here with the lovely Martha from the NSPCC. She's in charge of the child safety online, and it's a topic that I've really become not just interested in, but at the moment my son is almost 10, and it's obviously really, really important for me. Loads of our readers for years have been asking about this, and it's something I really can't get my head around. So thank you so much for coming in. I've got a few questions for you, which I'm sure will sort of pan out to be more and more. We obviously know that the NSPCC does a lot around this topic. But what I want to know is, how big a problem is this?
So everything that we know about the scale of this problem is that it's a really big issue and that it's growing all the time. So we published some statistics last week, and what we found was that there have been over 5,000 grooming offences recorded by the police in the past 18 months.
How many?
5,000. And everything that we know about that is actually that it's a vast underrepresentation of actually the number of children that are being contacted and being groomed. We hear from Childline every day from children who have kind of experienced these things.
Until they're grown up.
Yeah, and well, unfortunately, the problem is that generally children don't tell people. So we say that online abuse tends to be discovered, not disclosed. So it's much more likely that a parent might overhear a conversation, or that actually they get contacted by the police or something like that.
So that figure's probably wildly under.
So unfortunately, yeah, we think it is wildly under the number.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying. And something my readers often say, and I know it's not down to you guys, this is a parental preference, but how should we be limiting this sort of, I know people say screen time. Is this a major problem? I mean, I know on your iPhone when you look, it really shocks you how much time you spend when they break it down. How should we be dealing with that as parents when you're talking about screen time per se?
We don't have specific advice about kind of particular types of time, because it depends on, what the child is doing online, and that's why it's always really good to have those regular conversations. But one of the things that is probably quite important to remember is that if a child is online and they can only be online for maybe half an hour a day, that's still half an hour where a potential groomer could be contacting them. So we say that it's better that the time that a child spends online we know is safe. Absolutely. And then move from there.
Fantastic. Now, the big question, which I think we could be here for about a week discussing, but take me back to ground roots. How do we keep our children safe online?
So at the NSPCC, we have something called TEAM, which is Talk, Explore, Agree and Manage. And that's basically a kind of framework for thinking about how to keep your child safe. So talking is literally just about talking to your child, having regular conversations with them. Like you would ask them about their school day, you ask them about, what they like to do online, those kinds of things, who their friends are
new
online, and if there's anything new. And then explore is kind of along similar lines, and that's about like going on to different apps, seeing what they're like, understanding, what your child likes about them, and then maybe the things that they don't like about it as well, because that can really show you actually maybe where there are some concerns for your child as well.
Absolutely.
And then this third one, which is agree, is about agreeing a kind of contract with your child about, how they're going to use it. So this would be a really great way in which you could talk about screen time and kind of like come up with an agreement between yourselves about...
And trust, I guess, because
Yes.
as they get older into teens, my brother was talking to me this morning about his 14-year-old. And the knock-on effect of me talking about all this is my sister-in-law's gone in and sort of putting all these security measures, and they're saying, Mum, I can't believe this. You trusted me before. What's happened now, and why are you doing all this? And you've got to have that trust now.
You do, I think, and it's very hard to, children can access the internet in loads of different places in loads of different ways. So the best thing is to be having those conversations, because restricting their usage it can be quite difficult. And also, as you say, trust is the most important thing, because if something does go wrong, then what you really want is for your child to be able to come and talk to you and be open about what's happening.
So you'd say the most important is dialogue and talking to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had lots of our readers were sort of emailing and direct messaging me and things about this after I put this post out a few days ago. And one of them in particular said it doesn't matter what age restrictions or whatever you may have on these devices, as soon as they walk out of the door, they can get on their friends, on whatever. And I mean, That could be as simple as my parents used to do that with sort of sweets at home, you know. If they didn't allow them at home, when you left, you would go and have a McDonald's with your friends. So I understand that, but I still don't think that's an excuse for us not to put these security measures in at home and do the best we can.
Absolutely, and there are so most broadband providers will give you a kind of set of parental controls that you can put onto your broadband at home. Similarly, you can have things on phones as well, so you know, making sure that the safe search is on things like Google, so that if you type certain words, that kind of like it doesn't bring up any results.
Sure. That's where I'm really confused, is because I've been researching obviously these companies and apps and add-ons you can, and even when you're talking to the service providers, the BT or whatever, and they have these amazing things and they're really helpful, and you're like, great, this gives you a step-by-step, but A, I'm still sitting there an hour later trying to work them out, and B, we've got a great computer techie at my bubba, and I was asking him about the setups for BT and home hubs and all of that. What's it called? The router. So when you sort of embed whatever it is to say it needs to be in children's sort of security settings. And he said all you need to do is Google how to get around privacy settings, and it's okay for the young ones, but if you're talking about teenagers or early teenagers, they can get around them like that, and that's quite a worry. You know, if we're spending all of our time, they're sort of outwitting us, as it were.
I think it can be really hard, and I think that one of the things that kind of is a problem, I guess, is that, you know, you've got your broadband router, then you've got your phone, so you need to have those settings on all of those different
Do you
things.
need to do it on every single thing? Your Alexa, your laptop, your mobile.
So if you're going to kind of be as careful as you can be, and thinking about the fact that obviously when your child's out of the home, then they're connecting through 4G, so that's a bit different, and you're not connecting through the broadband.
5G, you know, is only a matter of time. That's terrifying on its own.
Yeah, so each device you would need to be doing separately, and obviously children can get around it, but I think it's a really good first step of kind of just that first blockage, I guess.
Sure.
So then I guess also at that point, maybe that child is making a much more active decision about what it is that they're trying to do online.
That they're wanting to see. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my next question was, do we need to look at each individual one separately? So I guess we do. So that's a few weekends
Unfortunately.
put down. Now, something that's really important to me is how you keep your child's privacy private online. I was on the tube on the way down this morning, on the train, sorry, and I wanted to send my husband a picture, and up crops AirDrop, and so the lovely lady Lucy, who I've never met before, in front of me, it was offering me to send her pictures on her iPhone, and then Daniel next to her on his laptop. You know, obviously it's easy to change your names and things, but these devices come to you, and I like to think I'm slightly tech savvy, but you wouldn't even think of that. So my 14-year-old niece, if she's sitting on the train and some guy's sitting there and thinks she looks cute, he doesn't even need to ask her. He knows her name. He can send her whatever he wants at the touch of a button. It really scares me, these things. And not just that, you know, then it goes on to devices listening. Instagram's constantly listening to you unless you take the microphone off. And if you want to do Instagram stories, you have to turn it back on. Just seems like it's so complicated, and they make it so difficult. Whereas it almost should be the other way round, sort of it comes to you as a simple and then you add on the extras.
Yeah, so I think we would definitely agree with that. And one of the kind of important things in this instance is thinking a bit about how do you embed safety by design. And that is about kind of, okay, what are the things that we can do to make our kind of our devices and the apps that we're using as safe as possible, and then build in those kind of additional features as something that people are choosing.
Exactly. We don't have a choice.
Yeah.
My husband has an iPod that he just likes to listen to when he's running. It's got all of his music, and he was pulling his hair out 6 years like, it's updating to cloud, it wants to push this on, it wants to get on the internet. He doesn't want to be on the internet on his iPod. He wants to listen to music. Then you've got to plug it into your computer. It wants to take all the information, send it emails. I mean, it seems like all of these big companies are telling us that they're trying to safeguard our security, yet they're giving so much away or taking so much.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why the NSPCC has been calling for regulation of social networking sites.
So that's the Wild West campaign,
Yes.
isn't it, that you're you're on. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the government is due to publish a white paper in the next couple of weeks, and we hope that they will include some of our recommendations there. But we think it's really important that sites, and particularly social networking sites, have a duty of care towards their child users, so that they have to be thinking about, okay, what do we do to make children safe? And when they want to introduce like a new feature, they have to think about, okay, what would the impact of that be on children? And we think by doing that, we would be able to kind of create an environment in which safety is thought about before we think about all those other things.
Just pushing these things out.
Yeah.
Now, it's pretty much impossible for your children now to bypass or avoid social media. How would you say, without these legislations coming in, how would you say to keep them safe? You know, if your 15-year-old's on Instagram, Snapchat, things like that, do you have any advice for parents?
I think in terms of social networking sites, obviously the minimum age for joining most of them is 13. So I think it's really important that parents have a discussion with their younger children about that and kind of come up with a good solution there. For older children, unfortunately, again, the best thing that you can do is talk to your child and really have that open dialogue, those conversations that you're having. And it is a
hard conversation about anorexia and, you know, sexing things that really you just think it's getting younger and younger. It's almost taking their childhood away.
Yeah, and obviously that's the kind of dual thing with the internet, is that it can provide a lot of good opportunities, but it also has all of those potential negative side effects. But if you're having regular conversations with your child about what it is that they're doing online, then hopefully those conversations do become a bit easier over time.
Yeah.
And you can start to have some of those kind of maybe more difficult conversations about the kind of content that they're seeing, particularly if you're able to have that kind of open dialogue in the first place.
And then tell me a little bit about, I heard Mark Zuckerberg was talking about encryption and whether, you know, you should have the freedom or whether it should be available, especially in cases of sort of grooming and things. What are your guys' stance on that?
So what he was talking about was end-to-end encryption of sites. So on WhatsApp you have end-to-end encryption, which means that I send a message to somebody, the only people that are able to see that are me and the person that I'm sending it to.
I was nodding as if I knew what you were talking about. I had no idea.
But the company themselves can't see any of those messages, so it's literally just me and then you as the person that I'm sending it to.
Whereas on Instagram or something, they own those photos, they can see what you're talking about.
Yeah, so they can then go into those conversations, and if there is a conversation between a child and a groomer, then they're able to pick that out, and then that can be used by the police if it's gone to that stage where police need to be involved. But it also means that then they're able to track people in terms of who this person is
and
where they are, which is really, really important when we're talking about something like child grooming. And given the number of cases that I mentioned earlier, 5,000 in the past 18 months.
It should be open.
It's really important that we're able to kind of see that.
So you're saying, so encryption is good?
Yeah.
So you thinking, so if it's encrypted, it means they can take that information?
No, so if it's encrypted, then they can't take that information.
Okay, so that's what Mark wanted it to be encrypted, so no one could steal that information. Yeah, okay.
And there are like really legitimate uses, like for your internet banking and things like that.
Of course.
It's really important.
But when it comes to Facebook banter,
yeah,
it probably shouldn't be encrypted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and is it encrypted on Facebook? They can...
So
I can never
some
remember
some
if they
bits are and some bits aren't. So
and I know he always campaigns majorly for that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
For the safety of his people. Now tell me, how can you tell if your child is talking to someone online? This is something that, I mean, I talk to my children, they're obviously a bit younger, but if on Fortnite or any of those gaming devices or whatever device you're talking about, how would you know if they are?
So the grooming process is quite a kind of complex process, but it generally revolves around an adult or another person seeking to befriend a child, to really gain their trust, and then slowly over time they turn that conversation into something that's a bit more sexual, and then they start to kind of seek to exploit them. That's quite a kind of delicate process. But you can start to notice some changes in your child. So they might become quite withdrawn or very anxious. You might notice that they're kind of responding to their phone in a different way. So maybe more secretive, those kinds of things are an indication that maybe there's something going on and that you kind of need to have a conversation about it.
So just really keep an eye on everything.
Yeah.
Something that always worries me is now, with especially with Instagram, we're constantly posting pictures of our children. I specifically only do, the backs of heads and things like that. I never put my children's face on Instagram because I think that's their choice, and when they're 18 they may not be happy about that. But there are lots of different adverts on TV that show how much information we give on a daily basis, whether it's the street we live on or the children's school or the name on their backpack. If you sort of took 50 pictures from anybody, you could piece together a pretty good idea on what pets they have, names of things, grandparents, things like that, which does scare me because it gives them information to talk to your children about, to make them think that they actually know you or your family. It's quite difficult to explain that to the children, but
it is, yeah. And I think, so you're right to kind of pick out things like that. We know that that's actually one of the really typical techniques that groomers use, is that they will kind of study photos and
first
see, so if there's a picture of a child and they've got like a riding trophy in the background or something, they start talking about horses.
Yeah.
And
immediately gain their trust.
Yeah. And so it is really important. And as a parent, it's also really important to think about what kinds of small things that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, that can be used to piece something together that is far beyond what we would kind of think of.
Imagine. I know, I watch CSI and it really freaks me out. Another thing I'd love to chat about is online gaming.
Yeah.
I know that's a huge topic for lots of children this sort of age. What are your thoughts on that?
So in many ways, online gaming is quite similar to the kind of conversations that we've been having around grooming. The big thing that we're concerned about in terms of online games is the opportunity for two-way communication, which is often built in as a feature of a lot of online games. But perhaps we don't really notice or think of it so much as a social network. But in essence, quite a lot of them are social networks, and they're kind of bringing people together random people together in different ways.
Yeah.
So actually you are exposed to quite a lot of people that you don't know, which isn't always dangerous, but it can be.
But it can be. And I'm sure that the wrong sort of people prey on sites like that or games like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's also worth talking to your children about is also, what they are putting out about themselves, because people will prey on children that kind of maybe say that they're feeling a bit low or a bit socially isolated. They will use those kinds of things too. So it's very important that kind of children really think about what kinds of things they're saying about themselves online.
And something else I wanted to touch on is, when I was a child, I remember any sort of porn mags was sort of, you would have a magazine, it would be on the top shelf, and no one would be able to reach or even see any of it. But obviously now, if you've got an Alexa in your kitchen, you've got access to anything you want. What happens if these sort of I suppose any age, but those younger children are exposed to pornography? What happens then? There's stuff that you just mind boggles to think what they can be.
And the type of pornography that children can be exposed to is kind of way beyond anything that might have been on a top shelf in a magazine store. Yeah. So there are a couple of things. The first thing is, particularly for younger children, setting up those privacy settings and setting up those blockers on your router, on your broadband, will help to filter out actually a lot of that material.
But, do you know, I didn't even know that Alexa would show you things like that until I just stumbled across it, which goes back to, why don't they, it's these devices.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important that you think about all of the different devices that are in your
could
home.
Show you anything.
Yeah, but I think much like your experience, actually, a lot of children do also, the first time that they see pornography is just by accident. They stumble across it. It's not something that they're necessarily
seeking out. That's more what I'm saying. And what would you do if they did not just pornography, but how do you support your child after they've seen something upsetting? I mean, some of the things online or on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever it might be, whatever platform you're talking about. What do you do if they come to you? I'm more scared if they don't come to you, I
Yeah.
suppose, and then you don't know. But is there like a standard practice of how you deal with that?
Unfortunately, it does depend on the parent.
Yeah.
It depends on the kind of relationship that you have with your child. You know, those kinds of things are really important. But again, it's about open, honest conversations and being open and ready and willing to kind of talk about some of those more difficult topics.
Sure.
And making your child feel comfortable about having those conversations.
Yeah. So obviously NSPCC is a great resource for parents in helping with all of these areas. But are there any other companies that you would really highlight as ones for parents to go to, helpful resources?
So in terms of helpful resources, the NSPCC actually run a helpline with O2. You don't have to be a customer with O2. You can just call them up and they will talk you through some of the more technical things around setting privacy settings and, you know, things about kind of putting settings in place for your router and things like that. We also have our NetAware website, which is a website that has goes through the 30 most popular apps, sites and games.
Oh, great.
And it gives you like a bit of a rating, so what's the chances of seeing sexual content, harmful content, suicide content.
Age appropriate.
And so you can start to get a sense of whether it's age appropriate, and that's done on interviews with parents and with children themselves.
Brilliant.
And then we put together that risk rating.
I saw the thing that you were doing with O2 as well. There were the 5 questions. It was the quiz, so the parents get asked a question, then the child. Yeah. That's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a nice way of kind of making something a bit more fun, which is obviously really important because, you know, it's very easy to be very, very serious about a lot of this because they're such serious issues.
Of course.
But, you know, it's also about just kind of talking to your child and kind of learning a bit more out about them as well.
Yeah, okay, cool. That's definitely what I'm going to do. Lots of people that I've sort of been talking to on this sort of on this run this week have said that you should definitely turn off autoplay. That's one thing that absolutely, going back to porn and things, you could be watching Peppa Pig and then with autoplay, God knows what could come up after that to do with pigs or I don't know what. So that's the first thing. I've actually been trying to safeguard all my devices this week and it's taken me hours and I'm not even halfway there. But that YouTube one, turning off autoplay, was one of the easier ones. The Alexa, trying to put on security things. I spent an hour with my husband trying to ramble through all of the tutorials and things to no avail. I didn't get anywhere. So
yeah,
I'm going to have to try that again. But it shouldn't be difficult though, should it? That's what's so maddening.
No, I think there's a lot that companies can do to build in safety by design, and I think it's really important that they're pushed to do that because it's the easiest way to kind of assume that kind of consent or that it isn't given until actually you decide to make that active choice that, okay, I want to be looking at these kinds of things, I want to have that information out there about myself. Assume that isn't the case and then go from there.
So obviously that's things that they can do, these devices that we use, and I don't think they're doing nearly enough. They're not doing much at all to safeguard our children. But how much onus do you put on them, the people who bring you these devices? Do you think that they should really be doing more? I certainly do.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a part to play, parents, teachers, schools, but I think that the tech as a sector really has a huge amount more to do.
Responsibility.
And that's why we've been campaigning with the Wild West Web over the past year to really push that forwards.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I had lots of questions from people, but there was just a couple, I don't know if they're really questions, but I found quite a few really interesting companies through people like internetmatters.org, which I know you guys work with as well, which is in partnership with BBC and things like that. They've got these amazing step-by-step guides. So it really does actually, for the first time I thought, God, I can actually do this. This will be easy. But what I found at the end of it is actually you're either offline or you're online, or you're on or you're off. So for your children, you get all the security settings, you sit down to it, and the bottom line is, do you want them to see internet or not? Now, is this something that, yes, for homework and things they need it, but would you suggest until you're 16, actually children just don't need the internet if they've got a mobile or an iPod or a...
It's really hard to say. I think it really depends on each individual child, each individual circumstance. But there are lots of good things about children being able to go online and being able to explore their identity, being able to kind of form relationships with people potentially from all over the world. There can be some really nice positive things. And so we wouldn't want to cut down on those opportunities because of concerns. It's about being able to manage those concerns and being able to make sure that you have those honest conversations
with them.
That's really the thing that you will be able to do that will really have the biggest impact.
On that subject of letting our children have their own mind, and that's so important, especially when it comes to the internet. I saw on Sky this morning, they were talking about predictive algorithms and how your web history actually becomes your future. And I was just thinking, I understand that for me, if I may be looking at a pair of shoes or looking at this or that, and they can then position specific things. But if you're talking about, say, my niece got a phone when she was 14, take it up to when she's 18, that part of her childhood, they have that knowledge. They know that she used to like Sam and Cat, and then she started wearing makeup, then she started going to this after school club. So it's pretty terrifying to me that these companies are trying to shape our children's future by what they've been looking at.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that often comes up is that, you have these algorithms, they're there for certain reasons and you can kind of see the logic behind them, but actually there is a whole host of unintended consequences that come from that, and those kinds of consequences haven't actually been thought through. And
usually it's monetary, I guess.
Yeah, and it's about kind of, making things best for kind of consumers, but, that's why we really need to think about children in a different kind of way and say, actually, for children, we need to take a different
measure. Well, that's what, and I may be naive here, there may be 100 companies doing this already, but I would imagine that when you give your child their first iPhone or whatever device it is, when you're setting it up, it should tell you, or any device actually, because people have iPads hanging around, or they have a desktop in their kitchen or whatever it might be. Surely it should say when you're setting it up, who are the users, and I can put in, I have a 4-year-old, and she should not be looking at age 18 rated movies. And I think it sounds on the surface such an easy thing for these companies to do, yet they're not doing it.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what I'm singing from your hymn sheet.
We would
I think
completely agree. Yeah.
Two last questions. One that absolutely terrifies me is the dark web. This guy asked me this morning, he said, have you seen at NSPCC a rise in experimentation, or is this something that's still quite new when you're talking about it?
Yeah, so in terms of the dark web, I think it's for children, it's not something that we see come up a lot. It's not something that we see through things like Childline so much. But it's there, and
it's a worry.
And I think in that kind of circumstance, it's really worthwhile, having those conversations so that if your child's experimenting in those kinds of areas, because obviously that's a completely unregulated space, and that can lead to a lot of accidental harm.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last question is, what's the main concern? What takes up most of you guys, your resources at NSPCC when we're talking about internet safety? What would you say are the most worrying, or I suppose it could be everything we've been discussing, but is there one thing that you can pinpoint? Or
I think that's quite hard, actually. Yeah. I think that because as I mentioned before, everybody has a part to play in terms of keeping children safe online. So we have to kind of think about all of that different groups, parents, police, schools, the internet giants themselves. All of those people are kind of people that we have to work with and engage with to really try and...
it's all a worry.
Yeah.
Would you say, going back to your first point about child grooming, would you say that's one of your main... big worry for you guys?
It's a really big worry for us, and I think that one of the reasons why we're so concerned is that we still don't really have an understanding of the scale of online grooming.
Yeah.
And the number of offences recorded by the police is one way of estimating it, but we know that that's an underrepresentation. So that would definitely be a huge concern for us.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Martha, thank you so much for coming in to see us.
Thank you.
Hope you found that interesting. And any follow-up questions, we're going to put lots of the information on the show notes, and I'm sure we can have follow-up chats. So if anyone's got anything to ask or any questions, please get in touch at info@mybubba.com. Thank you so much.